You're listening to Audiology. Support our work on Patreon, and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. Introduction. The Prague Defenestrations were a series of 3 notable events in Bohemian history where individuals were forcefully ejected through windows. The term defenestrate, meaning to throw someone out of a window, is thought to have been popularized in the English language based on descriptions of events in Prague in 1618, when angry Protestant representatives hurled 2 royal officials and their scribe from the window of Hradčany Castle, and later justified their actions in a detailed defense. Historically, defenestration was not rare and often involved aspects of vigilantism and collective homicide. The first of these intentional window ejections took place in 1419, followed by another in 1483, and the most infamous incident in 1618. The 1618 event is predominantly referred to as the Defenestration of Prague, though sometimes this can cause confusion, as the 1483 incident is occasionally discounted as a principal defenestration. This results in the 1618 event occasionally being labeled as the second rather than the third defenestration. The earliest and last of these defenestrations are known for setting off significant religious conflicts: the Hussite Wars after the first defenestration and the 30 Years' War following the last. Conversely, the second defenestration led to a period of religious concord in the region for over 3 decades through the Peace of Kutná-Hora. The 1419 Defenestration of Prague. On July 30th, 1419, the event known as the First Defenestration of Prague took place when an angry crowd of Czech Hussites, led by Jan Želivský, a clergyman from the Virgin Mary of the Snows Church, killed several city council members. Their frustration stemmed from the council's refusal to release Hussite prisoners. As Želivský's procession moved through Prague towards the new town hall, someone from the town hall threw a rock, striking Želivský. This action incited the mob to attack, breaking into the town hall and throwing the judge, the burgomaster, and other council members out of the windows, resulting in their deaths. The news of this violent uprising shocked King Wenceslas IV of Bohemia so severely that he reportedly died from the shock not long after. The root of this violent outburst was the broader community's dissatisfaction with the direction that the church was taking, coupled with the social inequities among peasants, church officials, and nobility. Nationalistic sentiments were growing, and Hussite preachers like Želivský, inspired by John Wycliffe's ideas, were calling for reform of what they saw as a corrupt Catholic Church and encouraged their followers, including inciting them to take up arms. The incident at Prague New Town Hall marked the transition from peaceful discussion to decisive action and led to the outbreak of the Hussite Wars. These conflicts would continue until 1436 and became a defining struggle for the Czech people. The 1483 Defenestration of Prague. On September 24, 1483, amidst the tumult of the Prague citizenry and during the governance of King Vladislaus II of Hungary, who was also the ruler of Bohemia, a considerable incident occurred. At this point in time, Vladislaus had not yet ascended to the leadership of Moravia and Hungary. That would only happen after the passing of Matthias Corvinus in 1490. During this chaotic period, supporters of receiving communion in both kinds, bread and wine, concerned about their diminishing influence, orchestrated a power seizure in the various districts of Prague, which included the Old Town, New Town, and Lesser Town. In the process, the Old Town's mayor and the corpses of 7 New Town aldermen were thrown out of their town hall windows, an act known as defenestration. This tumultuous event in Prague played a role in diminishing the extent of the monarch's authority and thwarted a return to the conditions that prevailed before the Hussite movement. Subsequently, on October 6, 1483, a unification agreement was signed between the 3 Prague municipalities, paving the way for the supremacy of Utriquism. This progression eventually fostered a religious accord and led to the recognition of both the Utriquist Church and the Catholic Church as equals during the assembly at Kutná-Hora in 1485. The 1618 Defenestration of Prague. The act of throwing someone out of a window, known as defenestration, had a profound impact on European history and triggered the outbreak of the 30 Years' War. Previously, the Peace of Augsburg in 1555 had resolved religious tensions within the Holy Roman Empire by allowing rulers to set the religion of their realm. The Kingdom of Bohemia, under Habsburg rule since 1526, enjoyed religious leniency, with Protestantism largely tolerated among its subjects. Emperor Rudolf II, who was also the King of Bohemia from 1576 to 1612, expanded the rights of Protestants. However, his mental decline led the Habsburg family to designate his brother Matthias as the head of the family in 1606. Matthias then methodically took control of various territories from Rudolf, starting with Hungary. In an effort to solidify his power in Bohemia, Rudolf II issued the Letter of Majesty in 1609, empowering the Protestant nobility and the towns to establish a de facto Protestant state church. After Rudolf's death, Matthias succeeded him in Bohemia, maintaining his position from 1612 to 1619, and continued to grant further legal and religious freedoms, guided by his chancellor, Bishop Melchior Klesel. The situation escalated when the childless, aging Matthias declared his cousin, Ferdinand of Styria, a fervent Catholic and supporter of the Counter-Reformation, as his heir. Ferdinand's accession to the throne in 1617 concerned the Bohemian Protestants, who feared their religious liberties were at risk. They insisted that their right to religious freedom, as outlined in the Letter of Majesty, applied to royal lands as well. While Matthias and his chancellor were willing to negotiate, Ferdinand was not. His attempt to halt the construction of Protestant chapels on royal property in 1618 led to intense protests from Bohemian estates. After their formal complaints were met with the dissolution of their assembly by Ferdinand, tensions reached a tipping point, setting the stage for conflict. The Defenestration. On the morning of May 23, 1618, a group of Catholic officials, including Count Jaroslav Božita of Martinice, Count Wilhelm Slavata of Chlum, Adam II von Sternberg, and Matthew Leopold Popel Lobkowitz, convened at the Bohemian Chancellery. At around 8:30 a.m., they got the meeting hall ready. Then, an hour later, Protestant nobles who had previously been part of an assembly arrived, led by Count Thurn, who was notably stripped of his position at Karlstein Castle by the emperor. The Protestants wanted to address the suspicion that these Catholic regents had influenced the emperor to halt the construction of Protestant churches on royal lands. The Count of Martinice cited a threatening letter from the emperor that scared the Protestant factions and challenged their loyalty. And the Protestants were keen to establish whether any of the regents had a role in endorsing this letter. Before responding to the accusation, the Catholic regents sought to discuss the matter with another superior, Adam von Waldstein, who was absent. They proposed to have an official response by the following Friday due to the upcoming religious holiday. However, the Protestant lords demanded an immediate answer, later exonerating two regents, Adam II von Sternberg and Matthew Leopold Popel Lobkowitz, on the grounds of their perceived piety. These two were asked to leave the room, and Sternberg affirmed their innocence upon exit. This left everyone's attention on Count Wilhelm Slavata of Chlum, Count Jaroslav Božita of Martinice, and their secretary, Philip Fabricius. These three admitted to being behind the letter. Upon openly acknowledging their role and seeming ready to accept their probable arrest and punishment, Count von Thurn publicly accused Martinice and Slavata of oppression and religious intolerance towards Protestants. Von Thurn then argued to the assembly that allowing these Catholic officials to live would jeopardize their religious freedom and legal rights. Subsequently, Martinice, Slavata, and their secretary were thrown out of the third-floor windows in a violent act known as defenestration. Remarkably, they all survived the fall, which was approximately 70 feet. Catholics interpreted this as a miracle, claiming heavenly or divine protection, whereas Protestants later claimed they fell into a dung heap, countering claims of miraculous salvation, though this detail wasn't mentioned by people at the time. Later, Philip Fabricius would be honored by the emperor with the title Baron von Hohenfall, or Baron of Highfall. Aftermath. Following the incident where Protestant representatives were thrown out of a window, both the Protestant nobles and the Catholic Habsburg dynasty started to rally their forces for the upcoming conflict. The situation escalated following the death of Emperor Matthias in 1619, when Ferdinand II ascended to the throne as the Holy Roman Emperor. At the same time, the Bohemian nobility ousted him as their king and appointed Frederick V, the Elector Palatine, who was a prominent Calvinist figure and the son-in-law of the Protestant King James VI of Scotland, who was also James I of England and Ireland, as their ruler. This act of replacing an established monarch, who was also the newly elected emperor, left the Protestant group without much-needed international backing for their cause. Merely 2 years after this eventful defenestration, Ferdinand, supported by Catholic forces, reclaimed authority in the region through a decisive victory at the Battle of White Mountain on November 8, 1620. This battle marked the onset of the 30 Years' War. Following their victory, troops looted and ransacked Prague for several weeks. Sometime afterward, 27 Protestant noblemen and prominent citizens were subjected to torture and subsequently executed at the Old Town Square. In a grim display meant to serve as a deterrent, the severed heads of 12 individuals were displayed on spikes on the Old Town Bridge Tower. These brutal acts further fueled the grievances that led to the prolonged and devastating 30 Years' War. Further defenestrations. Throughout its history, Prague has witnessed multiple instances of people being thrown out of windows, events known as defenestrations, even though not all such events are officially called the Defenestrations of Prague. Occasionally, these incidents may be referred to as the third or fourth defenestration of Prague, though there is no universally accepted use of these terms. One noteworthy case involved Jan Masaryk, whose body was found beneath a window of the Czechoslovak Foreign Ministry on March 10, 1948. Initially ruled a suicide, there were widespread suspicions that he was actually murdered, potentially by his communist colleagues or the Soviet intelligence agencies. A 2004 investigation suggested involvement from another party, a claim that appeared to gain support in 2006 when a Russian journalist relayed a hearsay story about their mother's acquaintance with a Russian officer who supposedly carried out Masaryk's murder. However, further investigations, including one started in 2019, have challenged these findings, positing that Masaryk might have fallen from a ledge rather than through the window. The investigation was ultimately suspended in 2021 due to the continued absence of definitive evidence to conclusively explain Masaryk's demise.